start by saying a huge thank you to Vanessa for the work done in that video this morning. Hands up, how many of you have been to the Songies food truck? Well, not nearly enough of you have been to the Songies food truck. Have you, Emily? No. Oh, salmon burgers on Bannock. Do you want to just have the benediction and head out? They had, do you know where they are? Across from the Canadian Tire, right beside, and this is where you maybe have been shopping, and that's where the problem, at the cannabis store. Right beside a large sign that says cannabis, and underneath it is food truck. Of course, in my world, they should be reversed. The big print should say food. But I just really love what Vanessa did with that. We took a long look at what the Reverend Dr. Carmen, our moderator, had said, and we just felt that we wanted to make it local. And you see she's done that. Now, today's Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to those of you who celebrate. I see Graham is here, and I know that his kids are in the Sunday school. And so for you who don't have any plans, food truck, perfectly timed. There's also 2 powwows happening today. I guess we may be a little late for them, but to know that we're invited to those as well. And of course, so great to see orange t-shirts, and I know people are wearing their carved jewelry and things. And this is what Carmen was really stressing, that this is a day of celebration. This is a day to say, wow, what we've got, what we share, what we've got to learn. Yesterday, I spent at UVic, and that's a fun place to try to find parking, yeah? Mm-hmm. So the big book on the pulpit, at least on the communion table, is by a man named Robert Janning, like Jennings, but with an A, and he's originally from Amsterdam. And we got invited because the United Church Archives, and I think maybe even our own, have been a help in his research. This is his second book on, and it's called The History We Share. And this one is about the Nanaimo section, the Methodist congregation, which of course is our metropolitan friends historically, and a school out at Sardis called Kokalitsa. And I know that Kelly's grandfather, or great-grandfather, was at Kokalitsa Hospital. I know my dad was, and Leanne was posted there when she was in the military. So probably there are more connections with Kokalitsa. It was huge. But, and the research is meticulous. And in some ways, he's challenging. Just off my script. Aren't you glad to know I have one? The well-known quote by John A. MacDonald, to take, save the child and kill the Indian, or some paraphrase of that. Actually, the first time that sentence was ever spoken was in the year or 2 following John A. MacDonald's death. And it was an American captain who said it. And so Janning sees as part of his gift to actually take the time to go back, keep on saying to people like Beverly McLaughlin, who quote MacDonald, saying, where is that quote coming from? Like, we really need to know the story we share. We need to do the research to find out the quotes, do the work. And so he has a lot of work on Thomas Crosby. I did not know that Thomas Crosby spoke 5 languages. Did you folks know that? You've been here long. So he spoke Chinook, which was a trade language of about 400 words that was common in, I gather, the whole Pacific Northwest. First Nations had a common language. He spoke English, and then he spoke 3 particular languages, which explains some of the depth of his effectiveness as a Methodist pastor, plying the waters in those days. But one of the little stories I thought for Father's Day, Janning took a course. He was told by a counselor to go to college and take a course, stretch himself. So he said very honestly, he said, I wanted to take something easy. He took creative writing. Now, I'm sure Adina might want to challenge him on how easy that is, but he said to the teacher, well, what would I write about? She said, well, what do you love? Soccer. Well, write about soccer. Write about soccer in your new land, because he had come from Amsterdam. And as he did the research, he kept on running into this name, Manson. Early soccer, 130 years ago, on Vancouver Island, a player named Manson. Big news. Manson helped win cups. Couldn't find out who he was. His name, in fact, was Harry Manson. His Christian name was Harry Manson, and he was from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, Nanaimo, and he was only known even to his own family by a small tragic detail. When he was 30 years old and his 6-month-old son was sick, he tried to jump into a train going right through their reserve to get to the town that had the pharmacy. He misjudged his jump and was killed by the train. That's all the family knew about him. It had been reported in the press of that day that he, a drunk Indian, not true, just missed his jump. But before he died, he had played soccer. And in 1898, the Nanaimo team, all white, except for 2 players from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, Manson, and a man named James Wilkes. Now, all of the goals scored in the winning game were from First Nations players. At the banquet, they were not invited. So today, if you're having a Father's Day barbecue, would you raise a glass to Harry Manson and James Wilkes and say to them, yeah, we wish you had been invited, but we remember you still? So Janning kept on finding about these games that Harry Manson had played as the winning player. And so his gift has been to reconnect with the family who knew nothing of his story. Isn't that tragic? They know now, and they were still soccer players. Isn't that interesting? And so Janning and the family have been at 4 different events where Harry Manson has been inducted into the Canadian Soccer Hall of Fame, the British Columbia Soccer Hall of Fame, Nanaimo, one other. There's 4 sports Hall of Fames that he has been inducted into because of Janning's research when his teacher said, follow up on something you love. I thought that was a great story for Indigenous Day of Prayer because it is a celebration in the midst of all that trouble that Janning found this man. And Janning said something yesterday that despite all the obstacles of segregation that were being constructed around him, and it must have been very intimidating to imagine playing the 2 people from the reserve, right? Manson, was breaking a color barrier in sports, and that's long before the people we think of, Jesse Owens, Jackie Robinson, were breaking the color barrier down in the States. And so Dean Manson, one of Harry's direct ancestors, direct descendants, has said, for a longest time I wondered who our heroes were. Who would our heroes be? And here it is, a great-grandfather of mine. He was a hero who's always been there, but we never knew. So I just thought, what a wonderful story for us to know. And the book was given to us for the Mumford Library, and so I hope that you'll have a chance to look at it, because when we look at those 2 stories we had today of responses to, in the Old Testament, the gift that God offered, what would you like? And we want to answer like that. We would like to have a generous heart. And the worry, of course, is for us that we would be disappointed by that request when Jesus says, share what you've got. So just as a little bureaucratic detail, and you know I'm not very good with them, but coming up at our next board meeting, we will be voting as the board on a remit from the National Church. Because in order to make some changes in the National Church, they have to have each congregation vote, and not voting is taken as a no. So, and it's just being asked to establish an autonomous and sustainable national Indigenous organization within the United Church. I want to get that right. So they have to vote on this. But certainly don't we want to answer with the words of Solomon, give us a generous heart, let us do this. There are always unknown questions, but we don't have the answers to a lot of it. But this has to be done as a preliminary step for that dreaming to take place, for that new thing to happen. And can we imagine a new thing? That the Indigenous churches won't have to come back to General Council for every change they make, but we'll be given this overarching sense of blessing. They've been organizing since 1960, Indigenous churches. It's a long time to be wanting to be given their own, some own authority and Indigenous systems of governance that would be different than ours. So we are hoping that this, with the approval of this remit and everything I hear from people from coast to coast, is it's a very positive response, is it will create within the United Church a separate United Church organization for the Indigenous ministries and allow them to shape what they consider to be appropriate theological training, for example, something that I think most of us could agree to. And so this would be consistent with the Indigenous circle calls and the care groupers within the Indigenous organizations. And so when we vote for that, I pray that we have that understanding heart to be able to respond and not to be like the young man in the gospel and find it confusing to be asked to share when that's not what we really wanted to do. So on this wonderful day, I hope there's time, if you can't take the walk to the down by the Songhees pathway in the harbor, maybe just look it up. Find some way. The Indigenous Day, of course, is the solstice, so you still have time to make plans. But find some way to find out something new, to celebrate. It could be expensive. You know, it could be a silver bracelet. It could be a burger from a food truck. It could just be a prayer of gratitude. Maybe you have an orange candle at home you can light. But we're all invited to this powwow of the sacred drum because it is a spiritual powwow. And we're all invited to take our place and to celebrate all that's happened, which can't we imagine the freedom, the energy that's released when we begin to discover more Harry Mansons right in our midst at Nanaimo. I think we could go forth. I think that we do have power and room in our hearts for renewed commitment, some more energy for this. I think we can you imagine journeying together to make it possible that by this time next year we'll have one or two more things to celebrate? This is a wonderful opportunity for us to listen in our lives, to honor the sacred drum and how we might do that. So may the Spirit grace us as God graced Solomon, as Jesus challenged the rich young man, that we can respond with open hearts in new ways, listening and walking to the beat of a sacred drum around us all. May it be so for us. Amen.